Hello, everyone. Welcome to Senior Moments. I'm Linda Brayman. One summer month left. I hope you have been having fun with your kids and grandkids, fishing, camping, swimming, or whatever you like to do. But if you are around children for a while, I know from experience that you will need a break. So sit down, relax, turn on your TV for Senior Moments. Senior Moments covers events and activities at senior centers in the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti area, such as the Ann Arbor Senior Center, Turner Senior Resource Center, the Pittsfield Senior Center, and the Ann Arbor Community Center. Also, the show provides valuable information for senior citizens on such issues as health, wealth, finance, and entertainment. The program premieres on the last Sunday of the month with the reruns on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m., Saturdays at 9 a.m., and Sundays at 5 p.m. on CTN Channel 19 for a month. 1 month left, so get busy doing whatever else you had planned for this summer. And remember, when it's over, we'll still be here with the same great shows like the one you're about to see right now.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz for Senior Moments. Today we have a guest, Dr. Helen Weingarten, a former social work professor at the University of Michigan. She's an avid photographer and travels around the world. Thank you for coming, and it's a pleasure to see you. And just the fact that you come from the University of Michigan makes you a star here in Ann Arbor, because that's an accomplishment right there. This is all about you being a photographer, though, not being a professor, in that you seem to have a hobby that's really gotten you very interested. But first of all, I'd like to know more about you as a person and how you got to be in Ann Arbor. So what's your story?
I got to be in Ann Arbor because I was a graduate student. I came here to get my doctorate, and I stayed, which often happens with
That
people.
wasn't your original plan, though, was it?
No, it was not my original plan, but I got hired, I got tenure, so it was really fortunate. And so my professional life was about teaching. I worked for probably about 10 years also as a therapist, but then my interest shifted. So that kind of gives you some picture of how I got here. I've always been interested in the arts. I've got my first Brownie Hawkeye camera when I probably was about 10. But I still don't think of myself as a photographer. I think of myself as somebody who takes pictures and loves it, and it's easy, really.
And did you use your photography in any way while you were teaching at the university or doing your research? Was that any part of your college life?
No, I didn't use my photography, but one of the things that I think characterized my classes is I used movies, poetry, so it was kind of multimedia, as well as sort of traditional lecturing or conversations that you use in discussion classes.
And how did you actually get into photography as something more than just taking family or travel pictures with the family?
Well, I don't think I ever really took family pictures. I mean, I think that the pictures I'm taking now are sort of better composed and more skillful, but the pictures I always took were of the things around me, and that's continued.
So that would include people and nature?
People. I brought pictures today that tell stories, but sometimes I'm just photographing scenic areas or a flower, but mostly I like to take images that have people in them and that tell a story.
And in terms of your work, I read a little bit about your work in social work where you were really interested in the cultural influences of how people do conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Is this something that in any way helped you observe as a photographer?
Maybe on some kind of subconscious level, but it was never something that that I thought of as directly related. But I think the more you learn to pay attention and the more sensitive you are to situations, that influences. It influences how I take pictures.
And to be a photographer means really to have a very an acute eye on noticing little details as well as the whole picture or the whole background.
Sure.
It's kind of multidimensional.
Right. But
when you're the viewer.
Right. However, there's always cropping.
Yeah.
I mean, the technical things about taking pictures now, which I didn't do as a young person, was it's so much easier. You can take a picture that you think is well taken and focused on what you want, but, you know, and this is for anybody who's listening who's a photographer, it's also possible to change the focus a little, move in on something, and so forth.
So to adjust as you see it.
Right.
Right. And did you take any professional classes at all, or was this something you just learned on your own?
It was something I learned on my own, but my husband is a very skilled photographer, and it's not that he taught me, but I watched what he did. So I became much more sensitive to the influence of light and composition probably. But there wasn't sort of direct teaching except on how do you work your camera and what kind of lens should I be really using. I mean, sort of on some of those technical aspects, I've learned a lot.
And I understand you've done quite a bit of world travel with your camera. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I'll start with my sabbatical year from the university, and I went around the world by myself. And
wow.
I went to England, walking in Italy, taught in Israel, went to India, Nepal, Thailand, China, and then was exhausted and came home. It was one of those tickets you used to be able to get where you could keep going in one direction.
Right.
And then now, of course, I said, why didn't I go to Australia and New Zealand, you know, which I could have, but
Well,
I didn't.
that's another year's travel.
That's
right
another
there.
year's travel.
Right. And in terms of travel, what was the most astounding, surprising thing that you noticed when you were in observing these different cultures and people living in different kinds of conditions with different kinds of clothes, with different kinds of food? What kind of commonality did you see?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think for me, the travel, I mean, I think I've always been sort of situationally alert, but I think when I went on my sabbatical, I went alone. And I think what I really noticed there is how people reach out to you and how friendly they are. When you're traveling as a couple or with friends, you're much more engaged with the person that you're with, and so it changes that kind of focus. One of the things that surprised me was in India, everybody wanted to have their picture taken. And they wanted to take my picture. You know, that there was no insecurity about the camera or hesitation. Now, some of the other places where I've gone, when I was in Israel, even though I was living there, people didn't want their picture taken. So, you know, that was a difference that I noticed.
And you have arrived at a point where your artwork is actually being shown. So let's just talk about the special exhibit that's going on at the Turner Resource Center. Is that going on now, or will be coming in at the future?
I bring my photographs there on the 26th. I think it goes up on the 28th. The opening
Of July.
Yeah, and the opening is on August 11th, and I think it then goes to the end of the month.
So it has about a 1 month showing.
Right. August 11th is actually, you know, sort of the party where you invite your friends, where you hope that people from the community come you know.
Well, I'll be looking for that announcement.
Well, I will be
I would
glad
love to see it.
Yeah.
And I would think it was hard for you to choose 5 out of the hundreds that you took. So, but these are 5 that must be special to you. So let's take a look
Okay,
at
sure.
the pictures and see what makes them special.
Okay.
So let's start maybe at the top of these 3 right here. It looks like, what country was it in?
That was in Japan, but let me say something in terms of overall.
Okay.
I chose pictures that have a narrative line, that aren't just, you know, a mountain or a bear.
There's a story behind
There's
it.
a story behind it, and that's something that I think I have a major interest in, you know, is sort of what's the story that's being told and what's the story that you can connect with when you're looking at it. And that may sound funny because the top one, I don't have people in it, but I was in Japan, and that's the aesthetic. You know, it's kind of the Zen, simple aesthetic that you have a few flowers, there's nature involved. So that was sort of telling something overall about the culture and the art. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's a beautiful composition as well. And what I like about that is you have different textures as well as different colors.
Right, right. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the second photo looks like these women were dancing in
The women were dancing.
And what country was that?
That was Vietnam, and it was in a city called Hoi An, and they had just had a flood. And so that was kind of interesting in terms of how people were kind of traversing the city. But there were all these kind of performances going on, and I thought it was just beautiful.
And again, you, in terms of taking it, did you ask permission to take it, or you just snapped away?
They were performing.
Oh.
I just snapped away. It wasn't something personal.
And this bottom photo, I can see my neighbors do braiding themselves with their children. Where does this take place?
That's in Guatemala. And some of the, it's interesting when you say you could see a neighbor doing this, because one of the things that I've thought about for a show is what are things that other people are going to like? You know, so it's not necessarily things that I think might be my absolutely best photograph, but I think part of the narrative is people can identify with it.
And connecting, as you said
Right.
before.
Right, it's a human story, you know.
Yeah, the feeling I get just by watching is there's a certain intimacy or connection with the two people where the person in front having the hair braided is sitting and being patient and waiting for this wonderful braid to be finished, and the other person working very hard to make it just right. I almost feel it.
Oh, that's really great. That's kind of what I'm hoping to convey with this, so that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
These were school kids, and when we went, I was with the tour group. Often we don't travel with a group of people. They were school children, and they were doing dancing and singing, and glad that there were visitors. We were visitors. This is cropped, and so that also is one of the things that the original picture has the whole body. But I thought this was more interesting and gives you a feeling sort of.
Well, it gives you more of a focus on a statement that you're making.
Right, and sort of the poverty and
But
in
you know,
the presence.
the dirt and dust on the shoes, the way they're laced, the way the socks are, the way they hang, all of that.
And the differences, and maybe I thought my mother grew up in New York, and she went to an all-girls high school, Julia Richmond High School in New York. And she had a school picture that I've never gotten, and it's all these young girls in uniforms with ties, and every single one had the tie different because they wanted to be noticeable. And so I sort of thought of that when I saw that. So even though it was a different culture in a very different time, it had that echo for me. The top one.
Yeah, and just to tell you what I like about this is that it's open to a lot of different interpretations. It's whatever the viewer brings personally and connects with. It's very available.
Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
Great. That's great. The top picture is also from Kenya, and it is these Maasai that you go to their village, and I think they perform, and I'm sure that the tour company is, reimbursing them in some way. But when you go on a trip like that, and I think this one was it wasn't with Overseas Adventure Travel, it was actually with the Philadelphia Zoo, because it was mostly focused on animals. And it was during the election of Obama, and his family was from Kenya.
That's right.
So they tell you, bring pencils, bring school supply. I brought Obama campaign buttons. And if you look, he's wearing an Obama campaign, and that big smile is totally natural. Everybody, wherever I went, wanted an Obama button. So, that was just thrilling for me, to kind of get it right.
Right. Yeah, and you brought something to them that they really treasured as well.
Right.
Right.
And he wanted his picture taken, so that was another aspect of the story. And I cut his head off when I cropped it because I thought it was more interesting.
So now, was he wearing some kind of beaded hat on his head?
It was a kind of headband, but the beading question is interesting because in a lot of African cultures, West Africa, Northern Africa, the art is kind of three-dimensional and sculptural, but the Maasai are, they're migrants. There's another word for it, but at my age, I don't always remember what it is. But, they travel, and so they couldn't carry statues or anything heavy, but they could wear beads, or they could have fabric that was dyed. So it's interesting because when you look at the art of Africa, the traditional art doesn't look like much in comparison to what you've seen in Nigeria or some of these other countries. But it's something that they're always wearing, at least traditionally. Now it's quite different.
So, and is what he's wearing typical clothes of the people there, or is it some kind of uniform?
No, I think it's typical. The red dye is something that cochineal, I think it comes from beetles and things like that. So, that's kind of the traditional garb of the Maasai people. But of course, this isn't a performance. Now you have people in blue jeans carrying, wearing headphones and carrying
Very
iPads.
modern.
It's very modern, and that's something true about, that you go to Africa and you expect you're going to be seeing all these, kind of exotic native people. But most of the people that you'll meet look like us, dress like us.
Right. And after this particular show, do you have any future goals in your photography, or are you just going to kind of wing it as it comes along?
Well, now my future goal, we're going to Botswana at the end of August, so of course and I take a lot of wildlife photography. But my immediate future goal is that I hope that I can sell some of these pictures because I have no idea where I'm going to store them.
I was just going to ask you, where do you put all of these?
That's a great question. At my age, at our age, you don't want any more stuff. And I had said to Bill, what are we going to do if none of these things sell? Because where are we going to put them? And I still haven't decided that.
Okay. And my last question is, this really excites me personally, that you took your camera, you learned some techniques, and you came up with these magnificent photos that tell a story. What would you say to the person watching right now who has a camera and basically just takes family pictures, like me? What would you say to encourage them to maybe open up a little bit more? And
I would say feel free to experiment and explore and pay attention, and don't worry initially if all your pictures are sharp or you get exactly the view that you had envisioned, because you'll get better at it. You know, I can say I've gotten better at it, and it's not that I've had any specific training, but, you know, practice. And I'd say also look at other people's photographs and what they're doing. As I said, my husband made me much more sensitive to the influence of light. So that's kind of...
So a lot of it is being more aware and noticing and being adventurous. And I must say, this has been a very interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to seeing the reception and all of your other magnificent photos.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure for me. I've really enjoyed it.
And thank you for coming to the show. We had Helen Weingarten, a photographer, and you can see her show at the Turner Resource Center. This is Bonnie Gabowitz for Senior Moments. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for being with us on Senior Moments. I trust you enjoyed the show. I'm Linda Brayman, reminding you to take advantage of the rest of the summer.